Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Write the Future podcast. I'm your host, Beth Barany, and I am an award-winning science fiction and fantasy author, editor, and teacher. I'm also a keynote speaker and filmmaker. Yep, I have a lot of irons in the fire. And one of the things I'm very passionate about is talking to other creative people who are part of the creative process and making our books, but also do some amazing things that can help us. So I'm very excited today to bring in Anna. Anna, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do. And yeah, I'm excited to jump in.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna. I am currently based in St. Louis, Missouri. I studied animation in college, and things just one thing after the next. And job-wise, it's a very competitive job market out there. So I decided to look into something a little different. And as it turns out, I illustrate for books now. So I do all kinds of author services for them when it comes to the art side of their books, so they don't have to worry about it because that's my job. I get to make so much pretty artwork, and I love doing it, and I can't wait to do more. This is my third year doing it, so I'm super excited.
It's so great. I don't remember how we met. It may have been in some other networking group, but I was really excited to hear about what you do, both from a filmmaker's perspective too, because I've been working with designers over there. And as a science fiction and fantasy writer, I daydream about the maps, I daydream about my settings. So one of the things I saw on your website is that you make maps and you do character art. Do you also do covers?
It's funny you say that. I actually did my first book cover last month. Right now, it's just the ebook. The author already has it uploaded to Amazon because she was so excited. It was just a surreal feeling seeing my cover on Amazon, but I'm working on the paperback version as we speak. Since it was my first book cover, I learned a lot. There was like a big process involved, lots of figuring out print lingo, making sure things are where they should be. So it was definitely a learning process, and it's like a witchy romance or witch fantasy romance, that sort of thing. So she's just like, we gotta have the two characters on the front cover, and I was like, say no more, I got you. So I'm in the middle of finishing the second half of that.
Ah, that's so exciting. So you've written a few articles for our blog, Writers Fun Zone. And so folks want to read more about how you work with authors, they can go there. But since I have you, can you tell us, and this is something I've thought about as well, how do you find the right illustrator for your book? And by illustrator, are we talking about people who do maps or people who do inset art? Like, what is the kind of art that you have been providing? And then how do authors find the right illustrator for them? How to vet them to avoid scams.
So I think what it comes down to is just style. What style do you like? And of course, that applies depending on which aspect. So character art, you could look at a bunch of different styles, maps, bunch of different styles. But book covers, a bit more narrow in the sense that if you have a specific genre, your book cover needs to reflect you have to look at other comparative titles in that genre, see what those covers will look like. And that's what your cover artist is going to look at too. Because when I'm walking around a bookstore and I want to find a romantasy cover, I'm not going to be looking in the nonfiction section because all the nonfiction covers are going to be bold colors, simple text. Like they're not going to be a bunch of filigree and like skulls and roses and all that other stuff. So that's a bit more narrow because you do have to fit the genre expectations when it comes to covers. Now, of course, you can do other things as well, but just keep that in mind. However, when it comes to maps and character art, you've got a little more freedom, and it's just what you like style wise. And what I mean by style, I mean that Illustrator signature look. So, like children's books have a very distinct style to them. They're very whimsy, they're very colorful, they're very stylized. I attribute them a lot to fun little like watercolor paintings. Like children's book illustrators have a very distinct look to them. Other styles include anime, cartoony, stylized, painterly, semi-realistic, realistic. So when you look for illustrators, narrow down what style you want because you don't want somebody commenting or placing in a bid and their style is the complete opposite of what you're looking for. So that's how you can narrow down other illustrators. I have roughly three different styles that I've been working on over the years. A lot of my interior illustrations, full pages, and my illustration boards, which you used to pitch to film studios back in the day. I love doing that size, but that's more painterly. So it's very stylized, very painterly. There's no outlines, very colorful. With my background in animation, I lean a lot towards cinematic framing. Like if I were filming this on a camera for IMAX, what would this shot look like? So I'm very partial to something like that. And then also when I draw character art, that's a little more stylized on the cartoony side because in animation, they taught us take a character but exaggerate certain features and just keep drawing it until you get a good silhouette or proportions that you really like or just fit that character. So there's all kinds of tests involved. So my character art is very noticeable by line art. I like to do dynamic poses and I will line art the characters and either painterly the background or line and color the background as well. So mine are a bit more on the stylized side, what you would probably see them in more an animated feature. So a little bit more on that side as far as style.
How do you advise authors to avoid any kind of scams with shopping for an illustrator?
A lot of authors will be on Threads and they will put a call for artists, whether it's book cover, character art, maps, what have you. They'll be like, hey, I'm looking for a character artist. They're going to get a flood of comments saying XYZ. There are legitimate ones, but there's also a bunch of scammers in there. And a big, ginormous tell is if they direct message you without your consent. If you both do not mutually agree, for example, in the comment section, then that's a big tell. That's a scam. And then the second thing is looking at their art style. So granted, I have 3 art styles and I'm constantly evolving, learning them, how to get better at them. But another big tell is when an artist or a scam account has drew something really bad 2 weeks ago and then they post again and it's so fully rendered, it's like crazy. And this doesn't add up. Something isn't, there's no way they got that good in 2 weeks. You want to see a natural progression. You want to see styles that are similar because some artists, they just work in one style and that's all they post, which is completely fine. And then other thing is when you're vetting artists, look for previous projects. So for example, on my website, I am not shy. I always ask the authors, hey, how would you like me to credit you for your IP on my website? Because I want people to know this is who I did the work for. Go check out their book because it's freaking amazing. So I will name the author and their book. And I will also name the publication date if it is applicable. Some of them, they get the art done way ahead of time and they don't have a publication date yet. And some are already published. So depending on that, I also list the publication date so it's easy to find them. Because then if you want, you can message the author directly and be like, hey, I got a question. Well, how was your experience working with this artist? So they know it's a real person. So another thing is also asking other authors is a good way to vet illustrators because a lot of authors will find out if their illustrator was AI and they'll cancel the project and be like, hey, beware this person. They charged me X amount for AI and not actual human hand-drawn artwork. So referrals are also a big thing because you can always search up if you're scrolling Instagram for some reason and you follow a lot of authors and you see artwork pop up and you're like, oh, I love that character art. 9 times out of 10, it'll be signed by the artist either with their signature or their tag online, and then you can go and find them, or the author will have them tagged in the description or in the comments. So other people can look them up as they want as well, which brings me to my next point is their presence. If the illustrator has a very good social media / online presence, that will do wonders. My tag on Instagram is the same as Threads, TikTok, and X, so it's easy to find me everywhere. And I also like websites because you can showcase your portfolio to a much wider audience. I like to communicate through email a lot because that way we have records for the both of us. Everything is in writing, so that way we all make sure we are on the same page.
Let's jump to timing. Let's talk about scheduling. Like, there I am, I'm editing my novel, and is now a good time to think about maps and character art for marketing? I personally start thinking about cover design in the editing process. I haven't yet hired anyone to do maps, and I've only done some playful character art as I was starting to explore my film process for the project. But I've never really tied that kind of thing to the book production process. So what do you recommend? When do authors need to start thinking about, oh, I want a map. I'm ready to put some funds aside for that. Or I want character art for my Kickstarter or for marketing.
So when it comes to maps, if you're putting it in your book, I've done maps as early as the author had written the first few chapters and they're like, I need a map so I know where my characters are going. Like, this is insane. I need to get this mapped out so I know what their journey is. So I've done it as early as that, but I always ask them, what is your trim size? Because if you plan on putting this in your book, you need to know the trim size of your novel. And that goes for any KDP. One of the standards for romantasy, for example, is 6 inches by 9 inches. So anytime I draw the map, I do it based off of those measurements. But I always tell the author, hey, I can sketch out everything, but I need to know, finalize what your size is before I ink, line, and color, because that is going to be very hard to change if your trim size changes. So you got to know your trim size, and that goes for book covers, that goes for children's books, that goes for interior illustrations. You got to know your trim size. And even though you've just written a few chapters and you're like, oh, I still need to finish draft 1, but you're really set on getting the book done, you got to know your trim size. Very, very big. So I can get started on that map as early as draft 1, or when you've edited everything and it's ready to be published, you just need to put a map in the book. So maps are flexible in that regard. And then as far as character art, that can be done pretty much whenever. I think the best timing for that, though, if you really want to utilize it, is pre-release of a book. You can use it as a teaser. You can use it as a newsletter sign up grab, like, hey, if you want to see this, if you want to see character art from my upcoming book, you gotta come on, gotta join my newsletter. So it's a way authors can, I wouldn't say suck you in, but draw you into the book so you're ready for it when it's published. And I've seen you can go as early as 3 or 4 months before your book releases. But depending on what artists you choose, you got to look ahead and see A, their prices, and if it's within your budget, and B, if they have openings for that time, and C, how long it will take them to do. So for me, character art takes about 2 to 3 weeks for a fully illustrated thing with all the fixings. So I can get that done relatively quickly, where some artists, depending on their style, it might take them 2 months. So just touching base with the artist, asking them, hey, how long is it going to take you to do this? So you have it in time for your release. Now, you can also get character done after the book has been published as a fun incentive to be like, hey, if you want a special edition of this book, it comes with character art as well. So it's a great marketing tool, and it's fantastic to use to draw. Because I'm an artist, I see pretty art for a book, I'm going to go run to find out where the pretty art came from. And if it has a book attached, I'm probably going to buy the book because it looks fantastic. Character art is just great before the book is out, in my opinion, because then you can really get that audience, tease them. Then once the book releases, they're going to be chomping at the bit to find out what more to the story.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great promo idea. And lastly, let's talk about how people work with you, because you were saying every artist that you want to hire is going to have a lead time. You need time to make the art. Of course, there's also, we got to build in time to hire someone. And I'm a producer, so I'm thinking about all of these. Like, there's the end product, and say the publishing date is here. How early do they need to come in and talk to you? And then how do you work with the authors? What's the process that you take the authors through?
So I'm going to start with looking ahead. So for me, every artist is a little different. I do everything in 6-month chunks. So at the beginning of January, I opened up slots from January till June. And just letting people know you can book me out as far as June right now. Now, next month in May, I will open up slots for the rest of the year. So July to December. I've already got people asking me, and I was like, I'll open those up in May, and then you can pick your slots. But that's just how I work. Some artists, they do it on a month-by-month basis, or they book out as far as a year in advance. So it really depends. I have a booking schedule on my website, so I have it all on there, like, hey, here are the slots that are currently open for these months. So even if you're not ready or you need to save up, you can look further along in the year to see if I have an opening. Because you can have the contract signed and ready to go as early as May for work in October, but that just means you've solidified your spot. Nobody else has taken that spot. So that way you have time to save up the money. And I also offer half and half if that works better within your budget. So just communicating with the artist, see what their booking schedule is like. As far as me, I'm going to do a map example. I love my map example. So when you commission me for a map, we talk all the dirty details. We make sure, do you want continent regional? Do you want any of these add-ons? Because I do offer illustrated borders, icons, accent color, texture background, and full color. So those are all different add-ons. You can pick and choose which ones you would like, or if you just want the base, that's totally fine too. So we hammer out all these details in email, and once those are all finalized, I send out a contract and licensing agreement for the author to sign. I always tell them, please read it over carefully, because sometimes I will accidentally misspell something or I will have the wrong number. I always tell them, please read it over carefully before signing. That goes for any artist, not just me. That goes for any artist you do a contract with. So that being said, once all that is done, say it's for the month of May 1st, I get started. If it's for a map, I will do 3 silhouettes. So I'll sketch out 3 different silhouettes for a continent, for example. I'll place all these cities and towns that they described, because the author will send me either a sketch version of their map and or a Word document with a bunch of descriptions, and I interpret from there. And then I send the sketches to the author in a flat book with my branding via email, and they can either pick one and you're good to go, or they get a revision stage as well. So if they want to pick one and make changes, or if they want to see 3 entirely new silhouettes, perfectly within, it's built into the price. So revision stage. And then after that revision 1 is approved, I move on to line art. So I ink everything, I write everything down, put in the name, city, towns, names, put it together, put it in a flat book, send it to the author. After that is revision 2. So at that point, checking for spelling, checking for readability, all that other fun stuff to make sure your map is coming away exactly how you want it. So you get a revision stage after that. And then once that is all approved, then we go on to the finals. So if your map has any color, that will be put in there, any final renderings. And then once that is finished, it gets put into a flat book, sent to the author for a final round of revisions if needed. So there's 3 revisions built in to my map making process. And then they can either revise, or they're like, hey, looks good to go. I package it up into a final package. I have an RGB folder for web, digital, and I have a CMYK folder for print. Everything is prepped and ready to go, depending on where you want to put it. I also put in a Word document, which has all your specs. So if you ever have like a book designer who's like, what size is this map? I put it all in the spec sheet so you don't have to go digging for it. And then I also include a bleed example. So if your book is in print, I give you a bleed example with the gutter and the bleed on the outside. So when you're sizing your book yourself, for example, in a formatting software, you can see how to size the map properly on the pages. So the bleed area is just what gets cut off. It's just me showing the author, hey, here's a visual, here's where the gutter is. That's why nothing important is in the middle of your map, because it's all going into the center of the gutter. That's why you don't want to put anything important around there, because it all folds in. So I give a bunch of examples that way. And then I also include the Photoshop files that I worked in, because I'm not scared about sharing my process. The reasoning behind that is, in the event your book designer needs to fix something small, or they just make a couple minor adjustments to suit the size of the book or whatever, that stuff happens. But like, yeah, by all means, you do you. All I ask is that is the only thing those Photoshop files are used for. They're just to make sure you get your tiny little adjustments. They're not to be used for anything else. So they're just me being transparent and letting, here's your files, have at it.
That's really great. And just for those of us who don't know, what is Flatbook? That's a piece of software?
It's a PDF with my branding on it, and it'll have my name, the author's name, the project type, for example, your fantasy map. And on the back, it'll list what stage it was or what revision it was. You can look back and see like the progress made, or if it's like for your records kind of thing. So it's just a way for artists to showcase their work in a professional manner.
Well, I think you've given us a really thorough discussion and overview of what it's like to work with illustrators, what it's like to work with you. Is there anything else that you want to offer up to authors? What's your favorite kind of genres do you work with? Is it only science fiction and fantasy, romantasy, that kind of thing? And who do you like to work with?
going back to our style conversation earlier, is when looking for artists, look at what genres they specialize in. So I specialize in fantasy and romantasy. I love drawing creatures as well. So like unicorns, dragons, love that stuff. I also have done some sci-fi, some dystopian maps. I'm open to other ones if you like the style. So it just comes down to the style. Authors I love working with are ones who are just like, here's a general overview, or here's the scene that I want drawn, but do whatever you want, man. So they can give me the scene, but I could draw it differently than how it's depicted. I think like a camera movement. If you're looking at something dead on with a camera, well, I might be thinking of the scene as an overhead shot. So a little different than what the author had in mind. So I like doing a lot of that. Author I'm working with right now, I was like, hey, how would you like me to draw this dog for your interior? And she's just like, well, here's some descriptions of him, but honestly, do whatever you want. And I was like, okay, I love that. I just like a little bit of freedom is nice, but I also want to make sure that it's exactly what the author had in mind. And communication is real big. So when me and the author are just messaging back and forth, just nerding out over sketches, it's so much fun. I enjoy it so much.
It's so great. Oh, I love it. As we wrap up this interview today, I wanted to ask you a question that I like to ask all my guests, which is when you hear how to write the future, what does that bring up for you?
To me, it brings up changing the norms, taking genres and changing them up a little, because from personal experience, some of my favorite genres, romantasy, for example, but I want to see something a little more, something a little different, but still in the same genre. So I think How to Write the Future is thinking of unique ways to, I wouldn't say reinvent the genre, but make it your own. Just make it something that you really love.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, I love it so much. And just remind everyone where they can find you on the socials, on your website. What's your tag? What's your website?
So my website is www.annaleitensdorfer.com. And on my socials, I am on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads mainly. I do have an X, but I mainly post to the other three. My tag is at, all lowercase, Valkyrie_hero.
Fabulous. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Anna. And everyone, be sure to check out Anna's work on the socials, on your website. Also, Anna writes for our blog where she goes into great depth on how to work with Illustrator and other awesome tips for authors and working with illustrators. So thanks again, Anna, for coming on to How to Write the Future. I so, so appreciate it. Everyone, that's it for this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Write long and prosper. All right, that's a wrap.